rich people do things different from poor people. Uptime is when you have to be at 110% of your capacity. That means you see a flow coming in uptime. See, I want you to know that downtime is the time spent preparing for the uptime. So I want you to know wealthy people know how to handle the details before they need to. You know, I was reminded of a season in my life after I was started Zoe ministry. And some of you may wonder, how did this ministry get to this point? And it got to this point because some individuals took it upon themselves to write an article on the master prophet. At the time, I was not known as the master prophet, his name is Prophet Jordan, and said, Bishop Jordan sells prophecy. And all of a sudden, all these churches started closing their doors, almost like the heckler that was in the chat room, you know, had nothing better to do but just to bring up the situation about money. That's why I talk about money so much, because I know when I'm at a loaded vault, something is always trying to distract me from empowering people about money. And I said within myself, never again. And at that time, we began to put systems in place. And while I was putting systems in place, I said, never again. At that time, I wasn't letter writing. I started letter writing and started building a database because I said, never again. Never again would I have to depend on churches, because when people pay you, they determine your message. And a prophet must become a free agent. Never again. Never again would I allow them to stifle me because of the conviction that I have. Never again would I allow them to put me in a vice where I can't move to the left nor to the right. Never again would I allow them to muffle the mouth of this prophet that I cannot speak truth to power. Never again would I become a slave and become a hireling. I will become self-made. And so we began self-publishing our own books behind Never Again. We started doing our own duplications because of the thought that rested my mind, never again. So we was able to come off of the road because we didn't need the road, because instead of us going to the road came to us because of never again. We were able to impact your lives and train prophets. When people say, you can't train prophets, we said, well, we are going to train prophets, and we had schools of the prophets. And we was a part of a denomination, they would have never let us do that. But because we freed ourselves and said never again, that's why you are experiencing this company of prophets. You can't take music out of the church. Well, who says so? Who says you have to have praise and worship? Well, you're Pentecostal. Y'all have to jump and shout. Well, we're not going to do that. Why? Because way back when they started putting me out of churches and would not let me speak, and when I picked up that never again, I began to land upon my feet, and I was able to speak my truth again and again. See, every one of you on this line tonight, there's going to have to be something that stands up on the inside of you and say, never again. There's going to have to be a situation, whether you're in a a marriage that is not right. At some point, you're going to take that last blow and you're going to stand up and look that spouse in the face and say, never again. Some of you are going to have a child that you're looking at that is abusing you in your own home. You're going to look at that child once and for all and say, never again. Some of you are in churches that you know that you're not handled correctly, and you know that your gifts are not emerging. You're going to stand up and lift your hands in one last worship service and say, never again. And it's when you come to that point that you begin to say, never again, God begins to show you your exit out of that wilderness experience, the place of wild happenings, out of that wilderness, and you will land yourself into a promised land. God took Zoe and landed us into a never again. And we ended up in a promised land where we're free to speak our truth. And this is why we can turn around and have you say on the line, and that is the what?
Power of prophecy.
Because we stood up in the face of a situation and said, never again.
Okay.
See, this is powerful. When I was in a church in New Jersey, and we was having an intercessory prayer in that church on Friday night, and it grew beyond the chapel into the main sanctuary. The pastor became concerned. And we were serving in this church, and serving in a great capacity. And the enemy filled his heart. And they began to ask us out of the church and told us to leave for no reason at all. At that point, I could have probably joined up with a lot of different churches. But something on the inside of me said, never again. And it was in that month of March where we began to start Zoe Ministries. Sometimes you are not going to birth your next season until you come in to a never again moment. This house was birthed out of persecution. And that's why today I can rejoice. And I'm glad and happy to say we're free at last. Free at last. Thank God Almighty, I'm what?
Free
at last.
That's why we can prophesy freedom to the woman's son that was on death row. We know what it is to be bound. But see, it would have they never would have became free if I didn't taste bondage on some level and was able to say never again. The individual that they were about, they were telling them, plea bargain. It will look better for you because it does not look good. And they're talking about giving you a ridiculous amount of time if you don't win the case. If I didn't say never again back there in 1983, I would have never been able to prophesy to those individuals. The individuals in part of Sharpeville 6, see, it took that never again to birth the seasons for me to have prophesied to them. If I didn't say never again, that woman's son would have taken the plea bargain. Look at the things that would not have gotten interrupted.